Shalom everyone, and welcome to our new weekly Soul of the Parsha class. This week's Parsha is parashat Emor. It is the 31st Parsha of the Torah, the 8th Parsha of the book of Vayikra. And our topic for today is the art of giving, which is also the art of teaching. It's the art of bestowing upon the other person. It could be our children, it could be our students, it could be anyone on whom we want, or whom we want to influence, to improve their lives, to bring something to their lives, bring light into their lives. It's a subtle art. It's something very delicate. We can easily become from good teachers and good parents to doing a very poor job of what we're doing. It's very delicate. How do we stand tall above someone without being at all arrogant or condescending? How do we maintain this balance between feeling very humble and very lowly, and also being able to be there, take responsibility, and teach what it is we need to teach, give what it is we need to give, and be the mashpia. The mashpia is the giver, the influencer, the bestower, the one who knows that he holds on to certain truth, and that truth needs to be passed on, but this must be done in absolute humility. This is a delicate balancing act. It's like walking on a tightrope, and you can fall in two directions very, very easily and very powerfully. So this is our topic for today. This parsha has several topics. What we're talking this year only about the first segment of each parsha, the first aliyah. And in particular, we try to focus on the very opening verses. And today we're going to focus on the very first verse. And the very first verse goes like this. I'm going to read it in Hebrew and then in English. ויאמר השם אל משה, אמור אל הכהנים בני אהרון, ואמרת עליהם לנפש לא יטמע בעמיו. And God said to Moshe, say to the priests, the son of Aaron, and you shall say to them, they should be careful not to become impure. That is, it means that they need to steer clear from anything that has to do with death. It is well known that in Judaism it's forbidden for a priest to go into a cemetery, or if he goes into a cemetery, there has to be special paths that are far away enough from the graves. Priests need to, the basis of all impurity has to do with death, and the priests have to stay away from this. But what's interesting about this verse is not this topic. This topic is a very particular one. This is the topic of the first verses of this parsha. Has to do with this warning, this rule, this mandate that the priests have, that they should be very careful to steer clear from anything that involves death. But what happened with this verse is that this verse was adopted and taken up, and a very basic general rule that has nothing to do with priests or purity or impurity has been learned from it. And this is what we want to focus on. There is something unique about the way this verse is formulated. There's a unique phenomenon here that doesn't appear in any other verses. You don't see it the first time you read it, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And this is the repetition of the injunction to say. It sounds very simple, but this is the name of the parsha. Emor means say, you shall say. And what happens here is that there is actually the verb appears 3 times. But what really makes it strange is the second 2 times. So the very first time is Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. God said to Moshe. This isn't special. Many verses begin like this. But then comes the strange repetition. Say to the priests, and you shall say to them. Emor ve'amarta. This appears nowhere else in the Torah except in this verse. So whenever the rabbis, whenever the students of the Torah, whenever they encounter it's a unique phenomenon in the way a verse is formulated, because there are many formulas that repeat. If they repeat, they're not special. But if every once in a while the formula is broken, that asks of you to explore me. Ze omer darsheni. It means you please go deeper into me, says the verse, because there's a secret hidden here. So what did the Talmud learn from this strange repetition, Emor ve'amarta, say, and then again, you shall say? So they added another element, and this element is that when the priests are told to be careful of impurity, they not only should heed it themselves, but they should also teach their children and make sure that their children observe this rule. Children run around and they walk around, but their parents, the priests that are older, need to take care of them and teach them that they should be careful not to go into a cemetery or not to go into a house that there's someone who just died there. And they should be very, very careful for this. So they should watch over their children because their children are not yet autonomous. So this is an explanation for the double repetition of saying Moshe is not only telling the priests something or saying something to the priests, he's also telling them to pass on this knowledge, pass on this teaching to their children. So this is the Emor ve'amarta. Say and you shall say. It's almost like tell them to tell their children, right? Something like this. So there's there needs to be a chain, a chain of transmission of this saying. So it starts as I said, there are 3 times that this verb to say appears. The first is God speaking, vayomer, and then emor, and then ve'amarta. Now this has been expanded even further into an even more general rule, which is that not only priests, everyone, the parents have an obligation to teach their children. This sounds very fundamental, very simple, but this is it's not so simple when you're talking, for example, about religious education. One is obligated to observe the mitzvot only when one is, if you're a boy, when you're 13, if you're a daughter, when you're 12. And maybe you can say, well, they only then should they start. But it doesn't go this way. They need to be taught, and they need to practice. They need to practice in the 2 senses of the word. They need to practice the practical aspect of the mitzvot. And they need to practice, just like you practice an instrument. They need to go into this when they're young, so then it becomes part of their lives. So this general rule that you need to transmit your knowledge to your children is also learned from this very, very verse. So what we want to do with this is we want to take this, the way Chazal, the way the sages formulated this, their exact expression, which is repeated in Rashi on this verse, is lehazhir gdolim al haktanim, to warn the big ones, the adults, over or regarding the little ones, the small ones, the children. So the exact term, the exact phrase in Hebrew is lehazhir gdolim al haktanim, to warn the adults or the parents or the grown-ups regarding or over or on their children or the small ones. Literally, it means to warn the big regarding or over the small in the plural. So it's like grown-ups and children, or parents and children, or adults and kids, and so on. So, of course, we can explain this in many ways. This could be, as I said in the beginning, this could be a parent and their children. This could be students that you may have if you're a teacher. This could be anyone under your sphere of influence. If you have a sphere of influence, that means you are the influencer, you are the mashpia. And then the people who are under your sphere or in your sphere of influence, they are called the mekablim, the recipients. So in that sense, you become big or great and they become small. They become almost like children a little bit because they're the recipients and you are the giver. You are the influencer. So we could also be talking about something that's going on inside of us. We have within us a child and an adult. The adult is the one that's more connected to the divine light, to knowledge, to wisdom, to rationality. And we want to pass on the light that this mature, higher self has to our lower self, childish or childlike persona that's within us. So within us, there's also a gadol and a katan, an adult and a child, or someone who's big and someone who's small. So what we want to go very deeply into this phrase, lehazhir gedolim al aktanim, and to ask, what does it mean to be big? And what does it mean to be small? Or what does it mean to be great or an adult? And what does it mean to be small or childish or childlike? How do we balance our greatness and our littleness, our maturity and our childishness at the same time? This is the balancing act. We should also add that the particular word chosen here to serve as the word to warn is also a very intriguing word in Hebrew. Lehazhir. It could have been lelamed, it could have been lehadrich, to teach, to guide. Could have been several words, but the word chosen by the rabbis and preserved by Rashi is lehazhir. Lehazhir is to warn, but the root of this verb is the three-letter root zohar. Zoher. This means to radiate light, to shine light. It is the very same root of the book of Zohar, which was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, whose yortzeit, of course, we're going to celebrate later on this week. This is also the week of Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, a very, very joyous festive day. That is the passing, which in the Kabbalistic Hasidic context, this is considered a very joyous day. When a tzaddik passes on from this world to the other, this isn't considered a tragedy or a loss. Of course, it's also a loss, but it's also considered a hilula, a day of joy. There is something joyous about the tzaddik, the righteous man, reuniting with his divine source. And also there's a certain aspect in which the light of this tzaddik can shine on with greater power and with greater impact after they pass on. It's often likened to a sun setting. When the sun is present in the skies, then it's daylight and it's warm and everything, there's warmth and light, the two things that we crave the most. But when you try to look directly at the sun, it blinds you. However, when the sun sets, then although it becomes darker and colder, you can indirectly look at the sun's light via the moon. The moon is everything that tzaddik leaves behind. It's his books, it's his students, it's his legacy, it's his memory. And there's something about the moon that you can look at directly. It doesn't blind you. And you can receive its light in a very direct way. So in a way, after the tzaddik passes away, his light, or in this case, his zohar, his radiant light, the light that shines from his Torah, from his personality, from his legacy, is even more radiant after he passes away. And indeed, when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was alive, he only had a tiny group of students. They were all together, including him. There were just 10 people who learned the secrets of the Zohar. And it wasn't even a book then. It was written very gradually and very secretly by his students. And they documented all their conversations and their Torah. And then it lay hidden for over 1,000 years. And only a few centuries ago, about 700 years ago, was it revealed. So now we have the benefit of the book of the Zohar. So anyway, this book of Zohar, which we celebrate on this week on Lag BaOmer, celebrating generally the spirit and the character and the person and the righteousness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is very deeply connected to this parsha because of this phrase that we just spoke about, lehazhir gdolim al aktanim, to warn the grown-ups regarding their children, or the elder priests regarding the younger priests. But again, the word to warn is lehazhir. So lehazhir, it's the root actually of several words in Hebrew. It's to warn, it's to be careful, lehizaher, and it's also zohar, light, radiant light. A very spiritual word for light. There are many words for light in Hebrew. This is in many ways the most spiritual or divine word. This is why it was chosen to be the name of the book of the Zohar. So there's something about that we can read this verse, Le'azhir gdolim al aktanim, that it's not just saying or teaching or giving over words, Emor ve'amarta, passing on the words. It's not just the words, it's passing on the light. Le'azhir gdolim al aktanim is to let the radiance of the Torah shine through you and into your children or your students or the people who come to your Chabad house, if you happen to be a shaliach, an emissary of the Rebbe, or an emissary of another Rebbe. Whatever it is you're doing in your life, we all have to be emissaries of Hashem to pass on His light. We need to be channels of light so that this light passes through us to other people, to more people. So we all need to be teachers or emissaries or messengers and conduits of light. In that sense, we have a certain greatness to us, even if we're not great people, in terms of who we are, what we achieved. But we have this greatness that is passing through us, and we need to transmit it to people who have not yet been, for some reason or other, not fortunate, either because they're young or because their life, their history, their biography, the way they grew up, or what happened to them in their lives, they are far away from a certain light that we happen to be the custodians of. So we need to transmit it to them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at three main interpretations for this phrase, Le'azhir gdolim al aktanim, to warn or to shine light from the great to the small. And we're going to order them because they come together. These three interpretations come together to create a very beautiful whole. It's like parts of a whole. And if you take all three of them as not just different interpretations, but stages, three stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of a process, it becomes something very, very powerful and very practical that we can really all use in various contexts of our lives as parents, teachers, emissaries, whatever it is. So we're going to order the three interpretations according to the three concepts that are very well known, and if you study with Miriam, you know them all, that were taught to us by the Baal Shem Tov: submission, separation, and sweetening. So many people know this, but this is also going on YouTube, and many people are not familiar with this, so I'm going to just very, very quickly repeat or describe what these three concepts mean, and then we'll go on to the three interpretations. So the Baal Shem Tov said that in every important process that we're going through in our lives, whether it's something we learn or something we teach or something that we work on in our own inner work, we should go through three main stages. And they then divide into sub-stages, and it's a spiral process, so they repeat, but there are three general steps. And they are called submission, hachna'ah, separation, havdalah, and sweetening, hamtaka. So, submission, the first stage, means admitting, acknowledging that I am imperfect, that I am not whole, that I am in need of growth, that I need to change, I need to learn something. I am imperfect. I am not perfect. No process, no journey of learning, no learning curve of any sort begins without a certain kind of submission, admitting that I don't know something or I don't have something, and I need to learn it, and I need to learn it for something that's higher than me. This beautifully connects to the fact that tonight we're going into the fifth week of the Omer, which is the week of the sphere of Hod. Hod means Among other things, acknowledgement. Lag BaOmer, the day of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is in particular Hod Shebahod, the Hod aspect within the sphere of Hod, which is the most Hod-like day. It's the day of absolute acknowledgement that we know nothing. And this is, of course, the key to learning Kabbalah, to learning the secrets, the mysteries of the Torah, is acknowledging how much we don't understand the world and God and the Torah. And this opens up our minds and our hearts to learning the mysteries of the Torah, because we should really go into any inner form of learning. When we're opening any Kabbalah book, Hasidus book, we need to open this from a perspective of, I don't know. And I acknowledge that I don't know. So anyway, this is submission. Submission is admitting or accepting my own imperfection and my the fact that I need to grow and learn. The second stage is called separation. Separation means that once I've submitted that I am imperfect, I can now go into myself and separate my lower self from my higher self, my lower aspects from my higher aspects. If I would have, had I not submitted first, I would not have been able to distinguish the two, because it was the lower self, which is stronger and cruder and louder, that is taking charge, taking control of everything. So I need to subdue and submit this lower self, and then the higher, quieter, more delicate self can come forth. And then I'm able to separate the two, and I'm able to tell myself I want to identify with my higher self and disidentify with my lower self. This is separation. And finally comes sweetening. Sweetening is when I go full circle and I'm able to regain a kind of naturalness. I was very unnatural during the submission and separation stages. I needed to accept the fact that I'm imperfect. I need to be a little bit even suspicious of who I am, of what I'm used to, what I'm accustomed to, the kinds of things I'm used to do, the kinds of things I'm used to say, to saying. And sweetening is when I've connected to a certain extent, to a sufficient extent, to my higher self, so then I can let go a little bit and let this higher self express himself without constantly stopping it short and doing this subduing or submission. So this is the sweetening. Sweetening almost happens of itself. It happens when I've worked enough on the first two stages, and then I'm in a new place and I can express myself freely or more easily, until I get to the next cycle of submission, separation, sweetening. So now we're going to look at three interpretations for the phrase "Le'azhir gdolim al aktanim," to warn or shine light from the higher to the lower, from the great to the small, which very beautifully correspond to the three stages. And then we really get something beautiful out of this. It's a beautiful tool that we can use in our lives. So, the first interpretation goes like this. What does it mean, lehazhir gdolim al aktanim? It means we need to warn the great, the big, the older, the elder, those with more authority, those who have the higher rank. They need to be warned that they need to look at themselves as small. Le'azhir gdolim, they need to be warned that they should be themselves small, that they should look at themselves as if they were small. They should think lowly, not highly, of themselves. So we need to explain this. When we look at the phrase, the way it was presented originally, it said "Le'azhir gdolim al aktanim." It sounds very simple. We have the gdolim, the big ones, and we have the ktanim, the little ones. But now, really, this is far more complicated. Let's say you're bigger than someone, age-wise, does it really make you bigger in a deeper sense? Are you better than him necessarily? Not necessarily. You could be a big baby, for example, and this could be a very mature young boy or young kid. If we're talking about people who are of the same age, this becomes even clearer. You have a teacher and a student, or you have a shaliach, an emissary or a messenger of the Rebbe or of someone who wants to pass on a certain teaching, and he has a student. So maybe the first one, you're the teacher, you know something the other person doesn't know, so it makes you bigger. But does it mean that you are essentially bigger or better or greater than the other person? Of course it doesn't. So the first lesson, the first thing to remind ourselves before we start teaching is that we're no better and no bigger and no greater than anyone else. Even, by the way, if we're talking about parents and children, there is something about parents and children that, of course, the parents are bigger and greater and more important than everything else. But there is something that if the parent thinks of himself as essentially bigger or better than this child, he will not be able to teach the child anything. Why? Because he doesn't experience himself as also a child and a student. The first interpretation, the first stage, is that the teacher must also be a student, and the adult must also be a child. And the emissary or the shluach that wants to teach must also be a chassid, a learner from his own Rebbe. They need to be small. This has several reasons. In our generation, there's something that's happening in our generation that didn't exist to such a degree in previous generations, that people will simply not have it, that they will be taught from a condescending point of view. It wasn't like this a few decades ago even. It was very commonplace to find a teacher acting very condescendingly. And it didn't trouble anyone, because he was the teacher, the master, the principal. There's something, it has to do, of course, with the ideology of democracy and equality becoming more and more widespread. The more it became widespread, the more equality became the main value that's heralded everywhere. The more it became that hardly anyone can stand it when someone tries to teach them something and you feel that there's even a slight sense of condescension there. Condensation, how do you say? Of arrogance, of considering yourself to be higher than the other person. It doesn't work. We could say it's part of the general deterioration of culture and civilization, that nobody wants to learn anything, nobody is willing to submit or subdue himself, or admit that he can learn something that people know something better than him. That we're all so arrogant that it's really too much arrogance. Someone could say this, that we're so arrogant that we can't stand the fact that someone knows better than us, or knows something that we don't, or is more competent in a certain field than us, and accept this very simply. But of course, there's also a very divine spark to this. And the divine spark has to do with the fact that when we add God to the picture, then indeed all the human hierarchies of whoever is greater than someone else, all ladders, all hierarchies of knowledge and competence and experience, in many ways, they all completely disappear. Because the wisest, most powerful, greatest person in the world is still infinitely far away from God. We are all infinitely far away from God. God is the master of masters, the king of kings, the teacher of teachers. He is higher than the highest. And not only is he higher than the highest, but he is infinitely high. And that means that if someone gets 0 in the exam and someone gets 100 in the exam, both of them, they really get a 0 compared to what God is getting in the exam, because God invented the entire subject. And so everything you know, in everything you think of yourself as being better than someone else, it's because you compare yourself to this other person. But if you compare the two of you to Hashem, to God, then you immediately feel that you're on equal ground, absolutely equal. You both of you, the wisest person in the world and the stupidest person in the world, they become equally stupid or equally small vis-a-vis or in relation to the infinite greatness of God. It's very simple. So it's not just that if you come to your parenting or to your teaching or to your shlichut from a condescending point of view, it's not just that it's simply not going to work, because people wouldn't stand for it and wouldn't accept it and would learn nothing from you. There's also a deeper reason for that. It's not just them being unwilling, or being, having a lot of chutzpah maybe, and not being willing to learn from you. It could be also that, but it's not just that. It's also the fact that your sense of grandeur is in many ways an illusion, a delusion of grandeur. So the first stage is להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים, להזהיר הגדולים, to warn the great that they should think of themselves as small. The Zohar, right, Rabbi Shimon's book, says a very enigmatic sentence. It says, Man de'ihu ze'er ihu rav, man de'ihu rav ihu ze'ir. Translation, he who is small is great, and he who is great is small. What does it mean? We'll start with the second half. He who is great is really small. Someone who thinks of himself as great, as gadol, is really very small, because he's comparing himself to other people instead of comparing himself to God. If you start comparing yourself to God, you realize how small you are. So the person who thought of himself as great is really very small-minded. However, man de'ihu ze'ir, he who is small, who knows that he's small, who thinks of himself as small, who is lowly in his own eyes, is truly great. He is the truly great one. So this is the very first element that we have here. We need to learn to accustom ourselves to thinking as ktanim, as small, as little, as children. I have a good friend who 20 years ago, he founded a Chabad house in a certain city in North India. And when he first went on his shlichut to set up the place, he had a farewell farbrengen with Rabbi Ginsburg. And Rabbi Ginsburg told him something beautiful. He told him, on the surface, you're going there to India because there are people there who need you. They're traveling in India. They don't have a kosher place. They don't have a place to teach them Judaism, or they're only learning Eastern religions. And you're the teacher, they're the students. You're the one connected to the light, connected to the Torah, and they're disconnected. And you're going there in order to give them what they don't have. This is all on the surface. On a deeper level, it's the exact opposite. The only people who can save you from yourself, who can help you grow, are those souls traveling in India. You're so lost that your teachers are wandering somewhere over there, and you have to get all the way over there, and you need to meet all those travelers that know nothing about Judaism, but they know a lot of things that you don't, and they are the key to your own tshuva and your own growth. And so you're going there not for them, you're going there for you. And they're your teachers, they're your influencers. Your own tshuva, your own growth, your own true learning and growing is dependent upon you meeting them and having this relationship with them, that they come to your chabaros and you talk. And of course you'll teach them things they don't know, but you'll also learn so much. If you'll stay here, it's not just that they're not going to have a teacher, you're not going to have your own teachers. So on a deep level, it's completely reversed. You're the small one, not the big one. On the surface, you're the big one. They're the small one because you have Torah and they don't have Torah. You're connected to Judaism. They're not connected to Judaism. On a deeper level, it's the very opposite. You're small in terms of your spiritual light. The fact that they're traveling there and they appear to be lost, it's because they're very big souls. Their souls are very big, very great. And they're looking for greatness. They want to explore the world and find a God that's bigger than your God. And you need this. You need them to remind you and give you this and give this light to you. And then together, you'll both grow. It's a beautiful, beautiful description of all teaching, of all hashpa'ah, all influencing or giving or bestowing. That on a deeper level, the teacher is the student. So, by the way, another way to read is the phrase. To read the phrase is להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים, is להזהיר גדולים על ידי הקטנים, to shine light on the great ones through the small ones. להזהיר גדולים על ידי הקטנים. It's the ktanim, the small ones, that are giving light to the big ones. So who's the big one? It's them. It's what you thought were the ktanim, the small ones. And who's the small one? It's you, that you thought you were the great one. You thought you were the emissary going to teach Torah. It turns out you're the student learning about spiritual greatness and freedom and exploration and seeking and doing tshuva. You learn it from those potential ba'alei tshuva. So this is the very first level. So the first interpretation of להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים is remind the great ones to think of themselves as small ones, to be small in their eyes, and then they'll be able to gain the light of those whom they thought to be the small ones, which are truly the great ones. So this is submission. Second interpretation, separation. There's another side to the whole story. If it was just the first stage, just the first interpretation, and you're a parent, and you tell yourself, well, really, ultimately, I'm just a child. I'm a child of God. I know nothing. I'm no better than my child. I can totally understand my child's faults and weaknesses and confusion, because I'm also confused. If you're a teacher and you say, well, I'm no better than my students, and I really know nothing also. I'm also just a lost soul. Or if you're an emissary, a Chabad emissary, and you say, well, I'm no better. I'm even smaller than these people who are coming into my Chabad house. Then it's very good as a starting point, but then you won't be able to teach anyone anything. Because now you've lost all confidence in the fact that you do know something the other person doesn't. You've completely lost all confidence in this. So there has to be a second stage. And the second stage, the stage of separation, is that now you need to separate yourself from the other person. And also separate yourself internally from the child within you. And you have to reclaim your greatness. So the second interpretation is להזהיר את הגדולים שלא יהיו קטנים. Warn the great ones that they should remind themselves not to over-identify with the small ones. Not to think too lowly of themselves in their own eyes. Because then they can't be teachers or parents or emissaries. You have to reclaim your own greatness. The pshat was the greatness, because you looked at the verse, at the phrase, it says, there are gdolim and there are ktanim, there are big ones and small ones, and the big ones have to teach, and you're the big one now. You're the responsible adult in the room. But then, in order not to actualize this in an arrogant or condescending way, you had to go through the submission stage. But it's only a stage. And the second stage is where you remind yourself that you are connected to a certain greatness, or to something great, or to something big, or to some light, to some knowledge, to some understanding of the world, understanding of Judaism, that the people around you are not as connected to it. It's not because you're better than them. You're not. You've reminded yourself of this very well in the first stage. It's because that's the way it happened to be. It's because that's just how it is. Someone has to be the teacher and someone has to be the student. And right now you know something they don't. You know Aleph, they don't know Aleph, or they know Aleph, but you know Bet. There's something you know that they don't. Otherwise you wouldn't be around here as the parent or the teacher or the emissary. And you need to be connected to this. And being connected to this means that you're not castrating or limiting your own self from knowing what you know and being connected to what you know and not being ashamed of it and not apologizing for it and not adopting some false humility that says, oh, who am I to teach? No, you are the one that needs to teach because you know something that they don't. And this makes you stand tall. You need to now stand tall and be the great one. Be the mature one. Be the big one. Be the one who's there and is connected to a certain truth and is unashamed of it and is unapologetic about it. And then you can give that truth to the other person. And because you went through the first stage, and the first stage doesn't go anywhere, it's now there as a sort of basic level that you've created, that protects the second stage from becoming arrogant or condescending or looking from on high. A combination is created between the two interpretations and the two stages that you stand tall while simultaneously feeling small at one and the same time. There's this famous psychologist called Jordan Peterson. He has a book called 12 Rules for Life. The first rule that he writes there is called stand up straight with your shoulders back. And for him, it's the first rule to life. Stand up straight with your shoulders back means that you shouldn't be apologetic. You should adopt a sort of combative or combative view. And, treat the world like a combat, and you need to stand up and fight and insist and strive and be very active. Here we have this, but as a second stage. Why? Because there's something about this and the way he phrases it, stand up straight with your shoulders back, and putting it as the first rule, that if you're connected to Judaism or to faith, something is jarring, something doesn't sound good. It sounds too much like Kochi ve'otzem yadi asali tachai lazeh. It is my strength and my power and the strength of my arm that gives me this power. And there's something you shouldn't do. This is an explicit verse. Don't say Kochi ve'otzem yadi is the strength and the power of my arm that give me this strength or this capability. No, it's Hashem who noten lecha koach la'asot chai. It's God who gives you the strength. Which means humility needs to precede this kind of standing up tall. So how can we imagine a more rectified kind of standing tall? It's not just stand up straight with your shoulders back, because that's all you. That's all you, and that becomes you bigger than him, and you better than him, and you want to be on top of some hierarchy, and him being on the bottom of it. And it does have room here. It's the second stage here, but it's the second one. It starts with knowing that you're no better than anyone else, and that's something more basic to identify with. And then, how do we imagine a kind of standing tall that isn't ego-like, or doesn't put so much of my own weight into it that it's all about me? By imagining that I'm being pulled up from my crown, so to speak. It's not that I'm, taking my shoulders back and my chest forward. He doesn't say that, but when you take your shoulders back, you put your chest forward. It's the same thing. He wouldn't say put your chest forward because it sounds arrogant. So he says with your shoulders back, but it's the same thing. But if you think there's another way of standing up tall, which is being connected to what's at the top of the spinal cord, so to speak, which is the crown, like the Kabbalistic sphere of crown. The crown is your superconscious, your faith, your connection to God. It's not you. It's in a way, it's God himself. He puts the crown on your head. I met this young Baalat Tshuva a few weeks ago, and she told me something very beautiful. She told me that whenever she got confused, because all of her friends were secular and they didn't observe any mitzvot, and she was suddenly connecting to Shabbat and also to Shmirat Negi'ah and not touching before you get married, and all her friends were making fun of her, so it was very confusing. So she said, whenever I was confused because they were making fun or they were attacking me or saying that it's nonsense, then I didn't know what to answer exactly, but inside I knew that I want to do this. I knew that I'm connected to this. So then I told myself, straighten up your crown. That's what she said to herself. Straighten up your crown. You know it to be true. You know it to be good. In your superconscious. Straight up your crown. And that pulled her upwards. She didn't say to herself, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Because that would have been just, her against them, me against you, like how do you arm wrestling? She came out of the arm wrestling by saying, it's not me or you, and I'm no better than you, but I know this to be true, and even if I can't convey this or convince you of this, internally I know this to be true. Where do I know this? In my crown. So I straighten up my crown, and immediately I stand up straight. Not with a puffed up chest, not with my shoulders back, not in a way that I'm strong, that I'm the one who knows something you don't. If for some reason I can't understand, I discovered something that you, for some reason, have not yet discovered. And I'm not judging you at all, because I have no idea what your life journey is and what the path that you need to go through. I have no idea. But I do know what I know. And what I know, I'm not hiding from myself. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm connected to it. So you need to close your eyes, remember your crown, straighten up your crown, and then you stand up straight. And then you can teach without being arrogant, without being condescending. In a way, we can say it's not just the crown. There are two sefirot that we can say are at the top of the spinal cord. One is keter, superconscious. The other is dat, which is consciousness itself, or knowledge, what you know. We can say that there are two things you need to be connected to. Things that you know rationally, you just know them. It's facts that you've learned. It's a certain understanding that you've gained. It doesn't have to do with faith. It's a fact that you know to be a fact. It's knowledge. It's not keter, it's knowledge. So in the second stage, you need to straighten up and connect yourself to two things. One is to what you know. You don't think you know it. You're not under the illusion or impression that you know it. Don't pretend you don't know it. Don't act childish or foolish. You know something that they don't, so it's your obligation, it's your duty to pass it on to them. If they're willing to learn, or finding a way, or trying at least. Don't be humble in a negative way. And you say, who am I to judge them, and who am I? You're not judging them, but you're seeing, you know, that they don't know something that you know, and which is very vital to them. You've understood something about life that this child or this student or this person in your house or whoever it is don't know. It's not you. It's not arrogance. It's just you know it, and they don't, and you see that they don't, and you see that they're wandering around, ignorant of this particular thing. You know it. So if you know it, don't shy away from teaching it. Lazhir et agdolim, teach, warn the great ones not to be small ones, to separate themselves from the small, not to be overly confused, to go into the small-mindedness of the small, of the students, and be so much intermingling with them that you can't teach them anything. So one is knowledge, And the other is also things that you do, it's not that you know them in some rational or factual way, but you have faith in them. This is subtler, it's more invisible, it's higher than knowledge, it's keter, it's the crown. There's knowledge and crown. Dat v'keter. Keter is not what you know, because keter has to do with faith. Faith is not knowledge in the regular sense. It can't be proven. It can't be rationally explained, because then it wouldn't be faith. It would be knowledge. But there are some things that you don't know as a fact, but you very strongly believe in them. You have faith in them through the faith that we inherited from Abraham, through the faith that we get from the Torah and from Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is subtler, because you can't teach it in a sort of direct way. In a way, you need to demonstrate it. It's something else. You need to just live it in a very authentic way, and that passes on to the other. But even this requires a certain standing tall, a certain connection to my crown, connection to my knowledge, connecting to what I know and connecting to what I don't know in the strict sense of the word, but I feel in a very deep way. I'm deeply convinced of it. I believe it. I have faith in it. I'm going to be more subtle also in the way I pass it on to someone. Maybe I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm just going to be there. So this is the second stage. It's a stage of separation. There's a little bit of pride here, but it's not pride in an arrogant, negative sense. It's, like I said, it's standing tall and being connected to these two things. There's also something here that being connected to this greatness within me, or this great knowledge or this great truth that I'm connected to, and not apologizing or pretending I'm not connected to it, it's also vital for this student or child, because then I'm able to connect them to their own potential greatness. Sometimes a child, when they reach adolescence, they think of themselves as bigger than what they truly are. They're just 13 or 14, but they feel like they're 18 or 19. And they feel that they don't need the grown-ups anymore. And if we would have remained in the first stage of the submission stage, of reminding the great to think of himself as small, we would have allowed them to remain under this false impression that they're adults, whereas they're not adults. And you give them the gift of retaining still their childishness, because they really are still children in a way. They're not 8-year-olds, they're 13 or 14-year-olds, but they're not 18 or 19 either. And this is a gift for them. When they pretend to be older than they are, or more independent, or more knowledgeable, or more understanding of the world than they truly are, at that moment they're disconnecting themselves from their root. Their root is you, their parent, their teacher, the person here that can connect them to something higher than themselves. But they think they don't need a teacher. They think they know everything. So they're disconnecting themselves from their root. When you're telling them, you don't know as much as you think you know, or there are some things you still don't know, and you insist on this, then they're not going to like it in the short run. But in the long run, you have given them an amazing gift. You reminded them that they still need to be connected to a root and to grow from that root. That if they will continue on their path, they will be rootless. They will be disconnected. And they're going to drift. And that's not a good thing. So by reminding them that they don't know something, and not being afraid of saying it. I'm listening to you and I'm very respectful, but I have to tell you something. You have no idea what you're talking about, or you have very little idea of what you're talking about. I know this amazing Ba'alat Tshuva. I'm talking about Ba'alot Tshuva today. Amazing Ba'alat Tshuva, who many years ago she was a student, and she spoke to someone who was religious. I think he was also already on the path of Tshuva, or maybe it was religious from birth. Either way, she was, of course, very anti-religious and very, condescending of religion. She argued with him about certain things in the Torah. I don't remember what they were. And at some point he told her, this we can go on all night, but the truth is you have no idea what you're talking about. And this is deeply problematic for this conversation. It's as if we're playing golf, but you have a cricket bat. It's like you're holding the wrong. You don't know you don't know what you're talking about. And she was appalled that he was so arrogant. She thought to say this outright to her, to tell her that she doesn't know what she's talking about. She was so offended. And if he would have been afraid of offending, he wouldn't have said it. But it's an amazing thing that he wasn't afraid of offending her. That this is the second stage here, that you're not afraid of offending. Offending is not the worst thing you can do to someone. The worst thing you can do to someone is to let them remain under the illusion that they know everything. This is far worse than offending them. So fortunately for everyone, especially the children she now has, after she did tshuva, and all the other people whose lives she touched, including my own, by the way, he did offend her. And she went to her room offended, and then started crying. And at some point admitted that he was absolutely right. That she does indeed have no idea what she was talking about, and she knows nothing about Judaism, and she needs to learn. And she was able to go into her own stage of submission and her own growth curve. So when you're willing to be the big one, after you've reminded yourself that you were very small in essence, you're giving the other person the gift of smallness, which is also the gift of his ultimate greatness. Because only once they admit that they're small can they grow and become the great person they need and can be and should become. So now we have a very interesting combination. The submission stage and the separation stage in this context, the two opposite interpretations of the same phrase, להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים. The first one made us stand equal to the other person, or maybe even under the other person. You should be lowly in front of everyone, said the sages. Right? Like the person who went to India to set a Chabad house, the Rabbi Ginsburg told him, you were the student, not the teacher. So you're under them, spiritually speaking. They're greater souls than you are. So the first stage made you very small, and the second stage made you very big. Now, this is the key to true reciprocity and equality. If you just say, we're all equal, if you're starting out with equality, that sounds very nice. And maybe it's a quick and easy way to get rid of arrogance in the world, or of presumptuousness. But it's also a wonderful way of creating a world in which no one learns anything from anyone. Because there are no teachers and learners anymore, because no one is greater than anyone else. You've abolished all hierarchies. So a hierarchy can be something very, it could have arrogance and dominance and all kinds of things that don't sound good. They're not good. But if you have two opposite complementary hierarchies, that in one of them you are the big one, on the other one you are the small one. You're on the top of one hierarchy and at the bottom of the other hierarchy. You have a deeper, richer, more complex equality that comes from their combination. So the first hierarchy that we founded in the submission stage was the hierarchy that I'm meeting someone, a student, someone coming into my Chabad house, even my own child. This child, this student, this person may be a soul much greater than me. And I need to learn from them. You can learn something from everyone, and you need to feel small. The second hierarchy, I'm at the top of it, because not because I stood up straight with my shoulders back, but because I straightened my crown, and my knowledge, and I connected to something that's higher, and now I'm able to stand tall and teach something. And then we get to a truly interesting balance that I can teach without being arrogant. I can learn without erasing myself. I'm connected to my truth, to what I know to be true, but I'm also very humble, very open-minded, open-hearted, because of the first hierarchy that I'm at the bottom of. The combination creates the third interpretation, the sweetening stage, this combination. The sweetening stage is when the light simply passes through you to the other person. This is the simple original meaning. להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים, that the light shall pass through from the big to the small, from the great to the little, from the adult to the child. Now that I have seen myself as both student and teacher, as both adult and child, as both listening, opening, watching the other person with admiration and looking for the greatness of their soul, but at the same time not shying away from being connected to what I know that they don't, then the light shines, but it shines in both directions. Another way of reading להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים is to read it as to shine light, or to make radiant the great as well as the small. גדולים על הקטנים, the great and the small all together. They both become radiant with light. There's a source in the Gemara that says, it takes a verse from Proverbs, and it talks about a poor man and a man who, so the simpler reading is, it's completely changed here. The original reading is fraudulent man, but the Gemara changes reads it in a different way, and it becomes a man who knows, an in-between man. He's not the greatest, but he's not too small. He's in between. He knows more things than the poor man. It's the intellectually or spiritually poor. So it says when a poor man, let's say someone who doesn't know something, and an ish tchachim, someone who does know something, when they meet, God lights up both their eyes. He shines both their eyes. Me'ir einei shnehem Hashem. God makes both of them light. And the Gemara says, both of them benefit from this encounter. The poor man, the student, obviously benefits because he becomes richer. But the rich man, the one who knew things, the teacher, also grew because he learned things from the student. He learned from the questions. He learned from the way the student learns. He learns from the fact that the student provoked him into understanding something in a more deep way, and thereby teaching the other person this thing. So they learned as they went through this. So they both become radiant, like the radiance of heavens, which is the source of the book of Zohar, the title. So this is our teaching for this week. We explored 3 levels, 3 stages of what it means להזהיר גדולים על הקטנים, and may we all merit to be both small and great at the same time, and then all of us will achieve true, deep, not a superficial kind of equality, but true equality, an equality in which everyone is both teacher and student, in which the Alter Rebbe says, Kol echad metukan michavero. Each person in the world is more rectified than the other person in some way, and therefore each one can learn something from the other person. And then we arrive at true, deep, fulfilling equality, an equality in which we are all part of a bigger hierarchy, not human hierarchy in which someone is bigger than someone else, but the hierarchy in which we are all getting closer and closer to God and to His radiant light. So this is our class for this week's parsha. If you enjoyed this video, please press like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon. Also, you're very much welcome to join our free weekly Zoom class once every Sunday. You can find the link in the description below. And until then, you can enjoy some more videos right now. Thank you.